Hello, hello. Hey, everybody. Our guest today is a man of many hats. Wharton educated, he's a lawyer, also involved with Warrior Rising as chief of staff, veteran nonprofit that helps veteran entrepreneurs get off the ground and get to where they need to be. Give it up for my friend, Ken Vennera.
My name is Brian Schoenborn. I'm an explorer of people, places, and culture. In my travels, spanning over 20 countries across 4 continents, I've had the pleasure of engaging in authentic conversations with amazingly interesting people. These are their stories, on location and unfiltered. Presented by 8B Media, this is Half the City.
So what's up, Ken? How's it going?
Not much, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, no problem, man. So, listeners, we're sitting here on location in Philadelphia, beautiful Philadelphia.
City of brotherly love.
That's right, and we're in the peak of the coronavirus madness, but we're not going to talk about it. We're going to give you guys something else to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Ken, tell me a little bit. One of the things I like to do is kind of discuss origin stories a little bit.
Sure.
You know, how people that have seen a lot of success and things like that, how they got to where they got. So
Sure.
maybe you could start with like just a little bit more of an in-depth intro than what I provided,
Sure.
what you're up to, and then we can go back and like kind of dig in like how you got from point A to point B.
Sure. Sounds good. So, as you mentioned, I have a bachelor's degree from the Wharton School, the University of Pennsylvania, my undergrad. Heard of that? I have a law degree, a JD, from Wharton University School of Law, which used to be the Delaware School of Law, and also have a master's degree in law in taxation from Villanova University.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of time in the class.
A lot of time in school, for sure. Much too much time, as my grandmother would probably say, for sure. I've been involved in a lot of veteran nonprofit space. Mm-hmm. We could talk about that a little bit later if you like as well.
Sure.
But, currently chief of staff with Warrior Rising, a super organization that, as you mentioned, helps veterans who are looking to start businesses, and accelerate them. And earn basically, their future. And, a few others as well. I'm involved with Vets to Industry, sit on the foundation board for them, and others that I've been involved with along the way. I can give you a little bit more background about that. I'm on the advisory board of Operation Homefront of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, for example.
What is Operation Homefront?
So Operation Homefront was founded probably about 15 years ago, roughly, I want to say. To provide sort of emergency assistance to active duty military while they were deployed in order to keep their families stable and things like that. They've since not changed their mission, but morphed their mission a little bit more. They help with veterans that need housing. They still help with some emergency financial assistance and things like that. I mean, they're nationwide, but they're all about really maintaining the families for the military, in times of, crisis and things like that. They've expanded out a little bit towards, National Guard space and things like that, and some veterans up to a certain point. But, some great work. As I mentioned, I was very active many, many years ago with them, probably during the heights of deployments from about, 2006 to roughly 2010 or so. I was chairman when they had independent chapters, did a lot to really grow the Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey chapter into an actual, operating entity from what it was. And, proud to say that it's still successful. I mean, the national organization has nationalized all of the chapters now into basically field offices. But some of the people, some of the key people that I had put in place, like Pete Stinson, for example, who was chapter president under me, is now a regional director for them. So, his territory pretty much covers all the way from Maine down to Maryland.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a huge chunk.
Yeah. So, so there's that. Try and do, what I can. I mean, not having served myself, I mean, it's pretty important for me to, help out the military. There's a large military presence in my family as well, and a lot of friends of mine and things. And
yeah, so I mean, I'm a veteran, obviously, and I appreciate everything you've done that you do for us. Just curious, I mean, where does all that come from? Like the desire to,
sure,
support, respect, be as involved with the military and vets
sure.
as you are.
I'd say a lot of things. My grandparents were, an immigrant generation, coming from Italy. But, they left Italy because there was not opportunity. I don't mean to sort of sound cliche about it, but that's really, the truth of it. They came to this country and were extremely, extremely proud of it. My grandparents themselves were the sort of oldest of their generation. So, and they came from very large families. So the younger members of the family were born here and were proud to have served in the military. I had a great uncle, my grandmother's brother, that, among others, others of her brothers served in World War II as well. But her youngest brother just passed away about 6 months ago now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was in the Battle of the Bulge, and he was 95, 96 years old, I think, when he passed away. So there was a huge patriotic feeling in the family, even though again they came from a different background, ethnically, et cetera. But very, very much in support of the military in this country, et cetera, and so very much loving the country and what what was done. My grandmother was very funny. Saved my uncle's letters when he would write them from every place, from like France, from Belgium, from Germany, even
That's
up.
Cool.
Yeah, and I still have them to this day because she cherished like every one of those letters that he wrote. I think their last stop, to be honest, even after being part of the Battle of the Bulge, their last stop in Germany was first in Feldbruck, which is right near Dachau, the concentration camp.
Yeah,
so I'm sure that they were probably involved in liberation of Dachau as well. Which
it's amazing.
Yeah, so pretty awesome.
So you ever pull out those letters and like read them, like get an idea of like?
I've looked at them with friends. It's very funny to see like that first perspective and know that it's sort of a family member that experienced that.
Yeah.
You see things from like that era and you think, again, it's a little bit cliche, but there's mentions of, we really have Hitler's boys on the run now and things like that. Yeah. And it's just crazy to think that they were experiencing that firsthand and relating it, back as best they could, back in those days, there was no internet or things like that. You couldn't even really pick up the telephone to call family or anything. So,
it was literally just letters, and like, who knows how long it took at that point.
And some of them
take them across on a ship or whatever else, right?
And some of them are censored, things like that, as to what was said, so that you weren't giving away like locations and things like that while they were moving. It's pretty cool. To feel like that part of history and things like that. So even subsequent to that, my father's generation, I have uncles that served in Korea, and then thereafter. I have mementos that they've brought back from, Japan and other places and so forth, from their tours. A lot of friends of mine served in the military as well, both, ahead of me and even slightly younger than me. And I just have a great respect for them, seeing what, they were dealing with while they were in and, the sacrifices that they made, being away from family at crucial times and things like that in places that they didn't necessarily want to be to do what they had to do, so it bred a lot of respect, for that. But the real sort of impetus to help me, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, please. This is for you, man.
I appreciate that.
This is for you to talk.
I appreciate it.
I'm listening.
It's all good.
Yeah.
So I was working in Manhattan when 9/11 happened. And, to tell you, it was, in all honesty, one of the most impactful kind of situations I've ever been involved with.
How close were you to Ground Zero?
So I wasn't, thankfully, at the World Trade Center site or even, close to it in Lower Manhattan. But, it was still extremely traumatic. I actually was coming in on the train that day. And, the first tower, we were coming up along the Meadowlands, area, like, and the train pretty much comes up at Lower Manhattan right at the tip. So you're facing right at the World Trade Center, and the first tower at 8:48 was already on fire. You then take a turn and start going up along Manhattan before you turn into the tunnel at Penn Station.
Yep.
But so, we probably hit that point at 9 o'clock. So as you know, at 9:02, the second tower was hit. So we literally saw the second. We didn't see the
Holy
plane
shit.
itself, but yeah, we saw the second tower explode, man. And I can recount to you, Brian, in all honesty, every word that was said on that train by everybody around me as to what was going on, things like that, the confusion, the craziness of not understanding, thinking that it was a rogue plane and a pilot problem and all that kind of stuff, all the way to, no, we're at war and things like that. And then getting into a city, one of the largest cities, on the face of the earth, and having it completely abandoned. I mean, I know you don't want to talk about coronavirus, but it's like a lot like that, apocalyptic, scenes of streets that are usually full of, hundreds and thousands of cars, like completely devoid of cars and people and all that kind of stuff. And then, just the horror of, the towers falling. These are like, they were the largest buildings, the tallest buildings in the world at one time.
Yeah.
And here they are collapsing with thousands of people that you knew were trapped. Just the horror of that. And, everything that came from that, us not being able to leave the city, that feeling of being told that you can't leave somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like being in prison, but it's very much a traumatic thing.
Unsettling for sure.
Yeah, like to say, you can't leave, you can't go home.
Right.
It's a very odd feeling. And then, having fighter jets flying overhead that you don't know, that you can't see from the ground, that they're necessarily U.S. planes. Not knowing what's going on, and
Pearl Harbor all over.
Yeah,
again,
like
kind of
really.
shit, right?
I mean, like it was trauma after trauma, like experiences. I mean, there were Grand Central Station was at the end of 44th Street, which was the street in which my office was. There were bomb scares, so they would get evacuated, and you would see hundreds of people running down 44th Street, which is a very narrow street. I mean, it's two lanes, but to see people running for their lives, man, like it's a strange feeling. And then, to cap that off, we were finally able to leave Manhattan that day. And, not until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the George Washington Bridge finally opened up. It took us about 3 hours to get from where the parking was all the way up to the George Washington Bridge, which was only about 70 blocks.
Yeah.
But literally just got across the George Washington Bridge, and a van had pulled onto the lower deck, and they closed it down again. So it was that kind of day where it was like you literally felt like you were trying to escape what was going on. And then to see hundreds, Brian, I'm not even exaggerating, but hundreds of rescue, EMT, ambulances parked in the center lanes of the New Jersey Turnpike all the way down almost to lower Manhattan. I mean, it's just
It's the first responders.
Yeah, the first responders from areas that were even further south than Philadelphia, of like my areas that I like recognize names of. Like to realize the kind of response that, was drawn by the horrible things that were happening that day. I mean, it just was tremendous, and I managed to come back into the city 2 days later. 9/11 was on a Tuesday. That Wednesday, nobody was allowed back in. But that Thursday, I made a journey back just to see what was going on, to check in on, clients, or just to get some handle on the chaos. And, imagine being on a 10-car rail train, and, the total number of people on those all 10 cars was probably 20 people, and I
ghost town.
Yeah, it just totally was crazy. And, I distinctly remember the car that I was in, there were 4 other people on that car with me. And, they had photographs of family members that they were going to try and go find. Now, this is 2 days later, Brian. And all I could think to myself is like, oh, my God, man, like, it's 2 days later. Like, if they're in rubble or like they're gone.
Yeah.
Right. But feeling like in that position of like, if that were me going to try and find loved ones 2 days later, I mean, like how horrible would that be? You know what I mean? Like, so again, like it was just trauma after trauma in terms of, you know, those kinds of things. I mean, Bryant Park and other big gathering, you know, open areas and things like that would have huge pieces of plywood joined together with hundreds of photos on them, like in makeshift memorials, like all over the city, man. Like it was just crazy. And then, you know, you would go back to like Penn Station and you would see firemen that like days after were covered in soot and stuff like that and just collapsed on the ground pretty much from exhaustion. You know, and seeing National Guardsmen in the station with machine guns and things like that. I mean, it's just not things you're used to in this country, man. And to have all of that happen at one time was, you know, fairly impactful to me. And that, you know, that was
changed everything, man.
Yeah, and you know, and so that was the genesis for me of like understanding why a lot of people would want to sign up, you know, after seeing those kinds of things. You know, I was a little bit past probably, you know, maybe the waiver age, you know, even at that time, but still was interested in doing some way to try and help. You know, and like I said, and then supporting friends of mine that were in because of it. You know, it just changed my outlook as to how I could play a part, you know, in helping out and things like that. And so,
you know, I was active duty when 9/11 happened.
Yeah,
I was you know, 50 caliber machine gunner. Active in the Marine Corps. I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, so I was in San Diego.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, you know, I was eating morning chow. I was in the chow hall eating breakfast. I'm sitting at this table by myself. I had already had PTSD at this point, so I was in the process of being medically discharged. But I was sitting there by myself, and I looked up, you know, there's these, you know, TV screens, right, monitors or whatever, up in the corners. And usually there's like the news or something on, right? And I'm like eating an omelet, ham, green pepper, onion, and cheese omelet.
Nice.
And I look up, and on the computer screen, or on the TV screen rather, see these two buildings that are burning. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, this is probably just like a commercial, like a movie trailer or some shit like that, right?
Yeah.
And then the entire chow hall got quiet. And I looked up again, and it said CNN in one corner and live in the other one. And it said the trade towers have been hit.
Yeah.
And it was at that point, you know, like I said, everyone got all quiet, finished my omelet, and as I left to go back to my barracks and get ready for formation, I heard this guy, he just screams, he just goes, "We're going to war!"
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, like my patriotism shot through the roof at that point, man.
Of course.
Like you know, if I wasn't already dealing with my PTSD, I would have been
deployed.
More than ready, willing, and able to be deployed.
Sure.
In fact, you know, my unit was the first to go to Iraq after 9/11.
Yeah, no doubt.
Fought in Fallujah, stuff like that.
No doubt.
It really tore me up for a long time, actually, afterwards, that I couldn't be there for my brothers. Couldn't be there to protect and defend
pretty common
country and or retaliate for it.
Sure.
You know?
But you find other ways to do it. I mean, and that's sort of, you know, me to a much lesser extent, obviously, than you. I mean, you're already wearing, you know, the cloth of the country at that point. But, you know, you try and find other ways. I mean, that's sort of what it's all about, you know, being part of a team, you know, is you make do with what you can do, you know, so.
So that's what led you to doing
a lot of military involvement,
philanthropic work and stuff like that.
Yeah. With that military, you know, direction, for sure.
So you were Ken Vennera, what, corporate lawyer, corporate hack?
Corporate lawyer, not corporate hack. Thanks a lot, Brian. Jeez. Corporate lawyer, for sure.
Lawyer? Okay.
For sure.
Okay. And then you started moving into this, doing some of this volunteer or...
Totally on the volunteer side. I mean, anything I was doing, even with Operation Homefront at that time, was all volunteer time.
Nice.
Still working full time and, you know, taking care of other things. I mean, I'm involved very much in my local community, you know, as well, like with my HOAs and things like that. But yeah, just doing it on the side and, you know, trying to make a difference as much as possible.
How do you have time for all that?
You know, I don't.
That's my question.
I don't sleep much. Yeah. I don't sleep much. You know, you guys in the military, you probably understand this more so, right? Is that, you know, I'll sleep enough when I'm dead, right?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of thing.
That's the old gunny says.
That's it.
Sure.
So, you know, I kind of living proof of that. So, yeah, I just try and do as much as I can, you know, and I'm pretty efficient when I do things, you know, for sure. When I have the support to be able to do it, but.
So tell me a bit about, I want to keep talking about this veteran stuff for a minute.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about Warrior Rising. So I know a little bit. I've gotten involved with Warrior Rising about 6 months ago, roughly.
Yep.
Something like that. That's how we met, actually.
Sure.
But for the listeners, maybe you can kind of give a little high-level view, and then I can talk about our involvement, how we got connected as well.
Absolutely. So Jason Van Camp, he was a major in the U.S. Army. He was a Green Beret and Ranger.
Yep.
He was, medically retired from the military, but still a, fairly young guy, and said, look, I have a lot of life ahead of me. Got involved in starting a business himself because that's what a lot of his peers that had gotten out were doing. And quite a few people that were colleagues of his would, want to sort of emulate what he was doing, and, got the idea of asking, him for assistance. And he said, well, maybe it's a good idea to create an organization or a program or a program within an organization whereby we could help veterans who are looking to start their businesses and support themselves, basically, and reestablish their purpose that existed in the military, reapply that ambition, et cetera, that existed there, restore, sort of that dignity of being, receiving benefit from what, their own hands and their own work and things like that. So he did, he created about 5 years ago, back in 2015, stood it up. Put together a program. At first, it was live instruction, but then converted to video instruction, et cetera. And basically, the program has evolved into a 4-pillar program that provides instruction, mentorship, funding opportunities, and then the last part, warrior community, which recognizes the fact that even coming out of the military, one of the things most people miss is that sense of team that existed around the military people. So it's reestablishing that, being the local face of, Warrior Rising in locations throughout the country. The organization has really, really prospered, quite a bit, thanks to, a lot of what, Jason and the team have put together. They, we're getting approximately, last year, over 1,000 applicants.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And, pretty steady clip of, 20 to 25 applicants every week.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where are they coming from? Like
all over the
50
country.
states?
All over the country. I can tell you probably the top 5 states. Number one absolutely is Texas. There's a good 13% of all the applicants are coming from Texas.
It's
second,
a big veteran state too.
Though. Sure. And they all follow pretty much that pattern as well. California is second. Probably with like close to 9% are all coming from California. Florida is probably a close third with about 7%. And then, of course, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, believe it or not. But as of last count, I think we had applicants from all but one state. I think we had 49 states that we had applicants from.
Wow.
Vermont being the lone holdout of all places. I know. Vermont, I know.
Wow.
You would figure. You would think it would be like Alaska or something like that, or Hawaii. No, Vermont was the lone holdout. Although, that gap might have closed since then. I mean, this was probably a month or so, 2 ago, but... Yeah, so, the organization really, it focuses on being a full life cycle. I mean, there's lots of organizations that do parts of it that are very similar, mentoring and things like that, as well as government programs through the SBDC or SBA programs and things like that as well. But, Warrior Rising really prides itself on being a full life cycle for that, so that if somebody comes in at any given stage, whether it's concept or whether, they're further along as well, they could have, be in an MBA program even. It pretty much looks at that individual and says, here's where you are, here's where you need to be to move on to the next step. And then we'll shepherd you, through all those stages, whether it's funding, whether it's, again, maintaining that community on the back end. Et cetera. It's not just sort of a one and done, we mentor. No, we're doing everything, that's part of that program to make sure that people feel like they're treated individually, with what their needs are, and then where they need to move on to achieve, viability, sustainability, which are two guideposts, and be able to sustain themselves, in business. So,
yeah, I'll tell you guys got me, man. We had this discussion the other day, you and I did, and I forget exactly how I came across Warrior Rising, but I did, right? I came across it, and I put in my application. So I submit my business plan, I submit my pitch deck, right? That kind of stuff. What kind of funding I'm looking for. And you had me when you got a hold of me and you said, Brian, I think you're one of the most prepared guys I've ever seen.
I hear you. It's truth, though. It's truth, Seen a lot of applicants for sure. Yeah. And listen, even those that aren't as well prepared, we do our best to try and, help them as well.
Well, that's the thing, though, because, I get nervous because, I don't want to fly by the seat of my pants. Right?
Sure.
So I want to make sure that if I'm going to do something that I'm going to put all my heart and soul into.
Sure.
Especially given some of these other opportunities in the past that I'd gotten the short end of the stick on.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I built my media company on a solid foundation.
Sure.
Right. But I think it's good to have that, but you also have to recognize at what time are you ready to take the leap and to start executing.
Sure.
Right. So like for me, I had planned, and I recorded some interviews and stuff like that, and I was nervous to hit submit.
Sure.
Right? And
sure.
It wasn't until a friend of mine, she put a big boot in my ass and said, fucking
do it.
Do this, Brian.
Do it.
Just
exactly.
Hit submit, right?
Hit submit.
Do it.
Do it. Exactly.
Just no more. There's no more pussyfooting around or whatever,
right.
Just do it. And so I have.
Yeah.
And, it's been going all right. But, but the point being is that if there's other applicants out there or entrepreneurs in general.
Veteran entrepreneurs.
Well, even just regular entrepreneurs, like in general, veteran or otherwise, there has to be a point in time where you have to say, okay,
sure,
let's execute.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the biggest two problems, Ryan, that I see, and this is pretty typical, as you mentioned, across the board, whether military, ex-military or not, is, people either follow one of two routes, and that is they either plan and don't execute, or they execute without planning, which is also a big problem as well.
Yeah, they could both be recipes for disaster.
And they are, because the executing without planning is definitely a recipe for driving off a cliff.
Well, that's where you're just making shit up, right?
Yeah, driving by the seat of your pants,
yeah,
that
exactly.
kind of thing. It doesn't work. It might work for a short time.
Yeah.
But that's why also we strive for, again, it's viability and sustainability, right?
Yep.
Like viability meaning, will it work, and sustainability, will it last?
Yep.
Kind of thing, because they're both very important. You can't have one without the other.
Yep.
It's a little bit hard, I will tell you, sometimes, especially trying to have people who put a lot of their effort into something, and they've worked very hard either in the military or in trying to stand up their business. It's hard to tell people that are entrepreneurially minded, and have a little bit of ego behind it, that
Sure.
Where they have gaps and identify where their flaws. That sometimes is a stumbling block, because people take it as criticism, but it's never intended that way. It's really just intended to say, look, we don't need to help you where you're strong, but we need to help you where you have gaps, where you're missing things. And it's a little bit hard. But I think once people understand that, they don't see it then as criticism. They see it as helping you in the areas where you're weak, and that's what a team does, right? I mean, that's what your teammates do, is they pick you up where you're weak, and help you.
Talk about egos, man, because not only are these people entrepreneurs, so they believe in themselves enough that they have something that people want to buy.
Sure.
But they're also veterans, which means they've gone through hell and made it out alive to talk about.
And seen a lot of things that other people haven't seen, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So it is hard. It's hard to tell somebody, like, here's what you don't know, kind of thing.
Yep. Oh, no, I mean, even in our first couple of conversations, I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, Ken. Yeah. You're just like, you kind of like, talk me off the ledge a little bit, shit like that. So I want to know, so you mentioned, I just want to talk a little bit about your partner, Jason, or, the leader of this.
Well, he's executive director. I work for him.
Right. He's the leader.
Yeah.
Jason Van Camp. So you're saying he's a Green Beret officer?
Yep. He was a major.
Major?
Yep.
Nice. I wonder if he knows my friend Chris. I bet he does. He was a lieutenant colonel, Green Beret. He was 30 years, Schmidt.
I don't know. Possibly,
he was an army, in the army for like 30 years, and 18 of it as a Green Beret officer.
Well,
Yeah, pretty long, significant career as well. That aside, because I'm just kind of mumbling on about that, but I'm just curious, like, what, if any, types of values or frameworks maybe that Jason got from his time in the Special Forces does he carry over, if any?
That is, well, it's not if any. There's certainly certainly a lot of them. I mean, that could be probably a show or program all by itself, Brian, to be honest with you.
Jason, we'll have to get him on.
you definitely should. I'd highly recommend it, man. I'll tell you what, Jason is one of the most inspiring guys that I've ever come across in my life. He looks at things with that intense drive towards success. I mean, he will tell no rush to don't rush to failure. He's a very selfless guy, very interested in helping other people. Even when he just wrote a book, Deliberate Discomfort, which is now out on Amazon, etc. But even doing that, I mean, there's people out there, especially in the military community, that write books, and other people, people have different opinions about former military people that write books and things like that. But I can tell you, in all honesty, I mean, Jason is definitely a guy that is about helping people. It's first about teaching and driving you to be a better person before even himself. I mean, he's definitely a guy that's about team, creating that sort of team spirit, and his concept of deliberate discomfort, from Special Forces times, his training, etc. Revolves, around that whole idea of, putting yourself into situations where you're not comfortable and getting used to that and making yourself a stronger person.
Oh yeah.
And I can tell you, I mean, that's the theme of his book. He tells it through stories of individuals in different situations to, as examples, and then gives you sort of the science behind it. I mean, it's a tremendous, tremendous book. I mean, there's a lot of great lessons, that he has there, but he as a person, man, it's way beyond even what's, in that book. I mean, he is definitely the type that inspires people to do better, which is obviously one of the main characteristics of, being a leader.
Yep.
Again, it's all about creating something above himself, putting himself out there all the time. I mean, I can't even tell you all the sacrifices. I could tell you, but again, there would probably be its own show.
Yeah.
All the sacrifices that he makes. I mean, he's got his own business. He's running, Warrior Rising. He's got a family, a young family, besides that, requires and demands, his attention and things like that. And he really gives his all to all of those things. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing to me, how he's able to do, all of that stuff. And like I said, I mean, I'm a pretty smart guy. I have a pretty solid background myself, but I definitely consider Jason one of the most, inspiring and admirable guys I've ever come across, in terms of having those qualities of leadership, but also that side that, cares about people, and things like that. He's definitely not the typical hard-nosed military when it comes to the interpersonal side. But surely, in terms of the values and characteristics that he carries over from his training that you asked about, he's definitely, all about, carrying them over in the best way possible to help people be better people, kind of thing. So
that's interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the concept of deliberate discomfort.
Sure.
I think he and I kind of share that ethos. For years, I've said about getting comfortable outside your comfort zone, right? So we word it a little bit differently, but I consider myself very comfortable being uncomfortable. It's the things that are unfamiliar, the things that you don't know, you haven't done, you haven't eaten.
Sure.
You have people you haven't interacted with, whatever. That's part of the reason why I dropped everything in New York and moved to China, right?
There you go.
I didn't know anybody. I'd never been there.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. Never mind the language, right?
Yeah.
But until you get out there and do something, like getting in that discomfort zone or getting outside of your comfort zone. I mean, I feel like that's where the learning happens.
Sure.
That's where the growth happens. You know what I mean? Like that's where, And there's nothing wrong with like staying in your little bubble your entire life either, necessarily. I mean, some people can live nice, comfortable lives.
Different strokes for different folks, as they say.
Right.
But, the real genesis of creativity comes from, stressful situations, unfortunately. I mean,
Yep.
I know you didn't want to talk about coronavirus, but
whatever. We can talk about it.
Well, not too much, thankfully. There's too much to talk about it as it is. But, the thing I find is that, innovation comes from stressful, from problems, look at all the inventions that war throughout history has created. A lot of innovation has come from, technology and things like that have come from, being in those kinds of situations where like, look, we have to do something about this. Whereas if people are just comfortable, they're never really going to look outside. There's no reason to look outside their comfort zone, as you mentioned, like their little bubble. So I would look at that discomfort kind of concept as being the genesis for creativity and innovation, for sure in society. So, it's that force to move, past where somebody might exist at any given time. And certainly, as I said, I mean, that's the credo that Jason follows, for sure.
What was what was the thing you're telling me? So we went for a walk earlier today, kind of meeting of the minds kind of shit.
Two philosophers walking along.
It was a little philosophical, yes. It was good. It was a walking meeting. But you were talking something about there's like a loop, like a cycle.
Oh, yeah.
The good people or strong people or something like that?
Yeah. So the saying goes that,
what was that?
Weak men make bad times make strong men make good times make weak men.
Right.
So, yeah, that's pretty much the cycle. And I didn't originate that, obviously, but clearly it's pretty accurate.
That stood out to me because I'm like, it's it's all about the hustle, right? It's about the struggle. The struggle is real, right?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
For example, I was basically homeless for 2 years.
Yeah,
right?
amazing.
I was couch surfing, I was living in a hostel for the last 6 months. I just got into my own place, fighting with the VA, trying to get my disability benefits and all that shit. And it took me, like, they were just sitting on it, man. Like, it took me going into the VA, triggering the shit out of myself. I was so triggered, I was like convulsing in this place.
It's a shame.
If I wasn't struggling like that, I was doing all that while I'm building out this company.
Sure.
While I'm managing a restaurant, right? Shout out to Chipotle. Woo. Keeping myself extremely busy. Like I'm working like 100 hours a week, right?
Sure.
And, but still taking myself into a place of extreme discomfort.
Yep.
Where I was extremely triggered, and I had to go there numerous times over the first month or so just to make sure that the paperwork was right. They understand my situation, right? Finally was able to get some VA treatment, which I've been denied for so long. Started getting that thing going. If it wasn't me taking that action when I was struggling, I would not have seen any sort of success, right? So as a result of me going there and taking matters into my own hands, it sped the process along quite a bit.
Yeah, and necessity is the mother of invention, like they say. I mean, it's unfortunate, but, that's what spurs on that creativity to want to, get out of that situation, right? Like most people, if they're in a good situation, don't look for ways to get out of it.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think about the innovations. It'd be interesting to see a study on the innovations between people coming from cold weather versus people coming from like the tropics. Yeah. Because that beach life, man, that's
right. Good. Like, who wants to leave San Diego, right?
You got a coconut, you got a beach.
Exactly. Why do I need to go anywhere, right?
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
It was funny. You mentioned you going to China, and speaking, not knowing the language very well or things like that. I mean, being placed in a completely foreign culture, et cetera. I often think it just reminds me of hearing you say a few of those things that, one of the things I admire most about my grandfather, my dad's dad, was, he left, Italy at 17 years old to come to this country. That's a bold move, man. Totally a bold move without his family. But didn't even have, if you have a certain level of education, even if you're still not educated in that language, you understand how to sort of get around a little bit better, how to ask different questions, et cetera, that might help you in that situation. But, he hardly had any education in Italy, came here at 17 years old. Wow. Started a family, within 2 generations, here I am going to an Ivy League school, and then law school, even beyond that. So, I mean, it's a real testament, again, to, that pioneering spirit or, putting yourself, like you said, in, or as Jason would even say, in that situation of discomfort, and then forcing yourself to excel, to
that's
get
the
yourself
dream,
out of
right?
it.
Move to America.
Yeah.
Work hard, and
Yeah.
hopefully your children or your children's children can see.
As long as that element of sacrifice is there, absolutely, Brian. I mean, I think in some ways, though, what's been lost on many a younger generation than you and I is people want immediate gratification.
Sure.
And that's the thing that I think has changed the most.
They don't want to work for it.
Yeah, or they're. It's not even so much they don't necessarily want to work for it. They're not willing to sacrifice their own gratification for the benefit of future generations necessarily. In other words, they're not willing to postpone their gratification in order to set the children, the future generations up for that success. And I think that hurts because my grandfather's generation, in and of itself, they would be considered successful maybe by the standards of where they came from, et cetera. But they wouldn't be considered necessarily successful in this country. I mean, they were blue-collar factory-type workers in this country. I mean, my grandfather worked in an asbestos plant, which who would take a job in an asbestos plant today?
Right.
Like, you would never do that. Yeah. Right. So it wasn't like he, in his own generation was successful. Right. But, in the way that mentality of sacrificing, for the benefit of, his children and then their children, and so forth, creates that opportunity. And I think that's what's, gotten lost a little bit is, it's not that people don't necessarily want to work hard. I think if people understood that how things worked a little bit better, they probably would be more willing to do that. But I think what's gone is the putting off, the self-denial kind of aspect in favor of, helping the future generations kind of thing a little bit. So,
yeah, I could kind of waffle on that one. I mean, because in one sense I agree with you, right? I think that sounds fairly accurate. And the other side of that coin, it does sound a lot like, millennial bashing. Right?
Well, I didn't mention any group.
No, I know. But like, I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial.
You're an elder millennial.
I'm an elder millennial.
But actually, that's in favor of millennials in that generation because that's one of the things. If you look at a lot of commentators, they'll say like the millennials are a generation without a hope of doing those things, and I think
but they're
that's
also saying they're
why.
the ones spending all their savings on avocado toast and shit.
Well, that wasn't me. That wasn't me saying that.
I know.
I don't think that. I think that a lot of people, if they're guided in the right direction, will do the right thing. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to be lazy or do bad things or anything like that,
right.
by far. I think that with the appropriate kind of direction, though, and it's like anything else. I mean, to sort of go back to where you're rising a little bit, again, you have people that are talented, sort of, former military in a certain direction. You just need the guidance in other directions to, create that analogy, to create that bridge sometimes. And you need people willing to do that. And, kudos to, people like Jason that are willing to, sort of show that path to people. I think that's what's really important. I think that's what's missing very often, in today's society.
I hear that. So I hear that. It can be hard to connect all the dots.
Sure.
Quick question. How did you two come into
contact?
How did you come into being?
So very funny. Like I said, I was doing a lot of veteran related activities and things like that. I was doing a lot of sort of freelancing on the internet in terms on LinkedIn specifically, helping guys find jobs because when I went into more of an advisory board role with Operation Homefront, I was really looking for an organization that would help former military find jobs to be again sustainable in that way. I couldn't really find at the time a group that I thought was being very effective in that regard. I mean, there were lots of groups that were trying to educate employers about how to hire military and all kinds of things, surrounding sort of that, but never anyone that was really sort of directly doing that. So I was trying to help people as I could with, mock interviewing or looking at their resumes and all these kinds of things. And, made friends with a lot of people along the way. And in particular, one guy, former Navy guy, he said to me one day, he's like, you should really get in touch with this guy, Jason Van Camp, and see what Warrior Rising is all about. They're helping guys, start businesses. And I thought about it for quite a bit and said, that's probably even better than trying to find people jobs because you start a business. I mean, you can possibly employ
it's multitudes.
Right,
Jobs,
exactly. It's force multiplier, kind of thing in a way. And I'm like, you know what? Like maybe I haven't, I've been narrowing my focus too much. In that, going into this arena of helping, military start businesses is actually probably even a better thing. And, got involved with Warrior Rising, got involved with Jason. And, I'll tell you, like I said, Jason's charisma, man, like his drive towards, what he's doing. I mean, again, you look at like traits of leadership, man, if people inspire, that's one of the key traits of being a good leader. And, Jason definitely inspires. I mean, clearly inspired me to, want to put my efforts towards doing what Warrior Rising is doing and making it into a success. So, but yeah, that's pretty much how it came about. So 2 years now, almost, just about, a couple months short, but pretty close.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sorry, kind of bouncing around a little bit, but
bounce all you want.
Yeah. No, I just as you're speaking, things trigger, right?
Sure.
Because I connect dots as well, right?
Yep.
It reminds me of you're talking about helping people connect the dots, helping entrepreneurs get going, that kind of stuff, veteran entrepreneurs. It reminds me. The weird thing is, like, when you're in the military, everything is laid out for you, right? You're part of this machine. And you do as you're told, and by the time you get through boot camp or basic training, or maybe your school afterwards, you pretty much know how to conduct yourself and what is expected basically every day.
Sure.
Right. So you're in this
mood.
Sure. What's the word I was thinking of? Whatever. You're in this fucking mode where every single day you know exactly what you have to do.
Sure.
On the entrepreneurial side, every day it's a blank slate, right? It's a clean slate. Like you got to figure out everything that you're doing. You write the script basically, right? And it reminds me when I went to grad school and when I went to business school, the first day of orientation, one of our, I think she was with Career Services, Barbara Heil, shout out to Barb. She wrote 2 words on the board, on this whiteboard. It said, embrace ambiguity.
Flexibility, name of the game, for sure.
That's something that's kind of stuck with me. That's kind of what it made me think of there when you're like, helping people connect the dots and the circles and all that stuff. Because, again, when you're going from something where everything is regimented, like that's the whole reason that term is there, right? It's a regimented routine, basically every single day, to what the hell am I doing? I'm creating something out of nothing, right? That can be a big change, man. And people.
Well, so I think, again, and forgive me for characterizing, never served in the military myself, but I think a lot of what you're talking about in the military is not necessarily that overall everything is regimented, right? What's regimented is training, right? And whenever you're in and execution to a certain extent, like certain operations, right? But that's because, like in life, you can only control the things you can control, right? I think the thing, again, piecing together from a military perspective, that people, they understand when they're in that situation, but then don't understand it necessarily once they get out because they're not within that framework, is that basis, right? That foundation for that kind of regimented training, et cetera, and that following orders in a certain way, following standard operating procedures, et cetera, is because eventually in many situations, especially in combat, you end up not seeing, the regimentation, right? In other words, you end up seeing the things that go off the reservation, right? So,
you're living life in the margins.
Right. So, what's that expression that, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, kind of thing, right?
Or like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Until you get punched in the face, right? Like, so shout out to Mike. So, but that's the whole idea, is that it's one of the beautiful things about military training is saying, like, look, we're going to create this foundation from you so that when you're placed into these situations where you're not sure, again, going back to the whole deliberate discomfort, concept, with Jason, it's training yourself to constantly react in a certain way so that when you're faced with that ambiguity, when you're faced with that uncertainty, when you're faced with, the enemy in your face at, 50 meters, kind of thing, you're now able to deal with that because of all of that muscle memory, regimentation, et cetera. Like, calming yourself down, thinking in a certain direction, is extremely valuable. It's extremely valuable when you're facing, uncertainty and things like that. I tell people very often, if I asked you, for example, to navigate from your bedroom door of your house to your front door, you're going to be like, not a problem, right? Piece of cake.
Right. Yep.
But
do it every day.
Right. But all of a sudden, if you're blindfolded and it's dark, right, you're going to start employing tactics that about your training, right? You're going to put your arm out and reach a certain distance and feel around to get your bearings for what your environment holds. Again, all of these things from training, et cetera, to understand, like, I need to know what my environment is. I need to know what the weather is. I need to assess the situation. All those things for training come in handy now, because what you're doing is reducing the number of variables down to the minimum number so that you have the best chance, an opportunity of success. The other analogy I use a lot when I'm like mentoring is that it's a lot like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. When you first start out with a jigsaw puzzle, you dump the box of 1,000 pieces and they're all over the place. Some are the back side, that's all brown without the picture, and some are the picture side. You have edge pieces, et cetera. So the first thing you do is turn all the pieces over so you can see that, they're all facing the same way. Why? Again, reduce those numbers of variables, of unknowns and things like that. You have to, a smaller number. Then what do? You put all the edge pieces together first. Why? Because there's a clue with the edge pieces that all the other pieces don't have, and that is they have an edge, right?
Right.
So you put them all together, and now you've reduced the variables down, to a smaller number. Then you start to put like pieces with like pieces, right? Again, utilizing as much information as you possibly have to reduce those numbers of variables and so forth. And little by little, man, you put those things together and you end up with a complete, picture from that.
Hell yeah.
And that's what it's a lot like, I think, So yes, there is that aspect of regimentation in the training and always going about it so you develop that muscle memory. But it's the application of that in those situations, like in combat or otherwise, where you're facing unknowns. And very much so, like when you're in business, of course, the consequences aren't quite as dire as being in combat, but, you're facing pretty, dire consequences if your business is going to fail and things like that, and you have to support your family.
Well, and your employees, if you have employees.
Right, and your employees' lives, et cetera. So, there's a lot of situations like that. I mean, look at all of the things that come up in business where, all of a sudden they're a regulation is passed, for example, that you didn't have to do X, but now you have to do it, and that's going to cost you 3 times as much, and possibly, you don't have a margin left anymore. Right. Or look at what's going on with this. Sorry, but the coronavirus thing again. I know. As much as you didn't want to talk about it, I keep going back to it. I'm so sorry, man.
That's all everyone's talking about.
But it's such a good example, man, because if you think about it, who was planning for this in their business 3 months ago?
Oh, nobody.
Who was creating that reserve to carry them over this, situation 3 months ago? And that's this, that's the kind of stuff. It's like, what do you do when something hits you that you really didn't expect? Well, now you revert back to your training, your muscle memory, your things that work in these kinds of situations to help
Sanitizing
guide
your
you.
hands.
Right. Like, wash your hands.
Not traveling on an airplane, Brian.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, but it's all of those things that help the situation, reduce the number of variables, make it more manageable. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, right? Nobody has a crystal ball ever, kind of thing. So what do, man? You reduce the number of things, the unknowns, down to a manageable level, and you do that, by utilizing that training and so forth. So, I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of regimentation, et cetera, to the military, but it's there for a reason.
It's for a purpose.
Exactly.
Sure.
And the same reason that it is there, in the military is the same reason it's effective and useful even in the business world or in life in general, in terms of developing ways to cope with situations, and the unknowns and so forth. So,
habits. We are a habitual
good habits.
animal.
Well,
Yes.
good habits.
Correct.
Developing good habits,
Correct.
for sure. And that's again training, right? In the military, develop good habits,
Yep.
right? And do things the right way all the time. You know what I mean?
Getting up at 06.
That's it.
Creased camis. Spit shine shoes.
Sure.
You're cleaning your rifle every second you get. Yeah.
Responsibility, dedication. I mean,
Yep.
all those factors that again will get you through tough situations.
Focus.
Focus. Exactly.
Laser-like focus.
Yep. Yep.
Do it.
For sure.
It's been a pretty good chat so far.
I
that's
think
what I'm
so.
saying. It's been-
Listen. I enjoy talking to you, man. I could talk to you probably for another 3 hours if you wanted to. But
Yeah, we could filibuster this shit.
we could. But it's been good, man.
It's been good.
Really love being on the show for sure, man.
Yeah.
And I love the thoughts that we're talking about. Because I think it'll help a lot of people. It helps a lot of people to hear. Even if they already know it, it helps to hear sometimes to reinforce
Yeah, well,
things.
I think I think one of the important things is this is a podcast, so it's not visibility, but you know what I mean, like accessibility. Maybe like when people have an opportunity to hear or see things that they might not know otherwise,
Sure.
or to see it again, maybe something they haven't
Reinforcement.
thought about in a
Sure.
while, like reinforcement.
Yeah.
It could help a lot of people, and that's, to be honest, like that's why I get people on that have interesting
Sure.
stories and are doing some really cool things,
Sure.
like yourself. But that's also why I'm so like open and vocal about my PTSD experience and stuff like
Sure.
that. Because the more you can talk about things, the more people can understand,
Sure.
and the more people can understand things, the more people can be helped.
Absolutely.
Because whether you have like a thing like a mental illness like PTSD, or whether you're running a business,
Right.
a lot of times you can feel like you're on your own.
Sure.
Being an entrepreneur can be lonely, man.
It can be. It can be, for sure.
When you hear other people's voices and hear that there's support out there, and there's resources,
Absolutely.
you feel a little bit less lonely.
I'll tell you too, Brian, just to close it out maybe on my end, as well. We talk about like a Wharton education and law school and things like that, and some people may view that as well. You're in a different league.
Guy's an asshole.
No, come on, man. Seriously, no attorney jokes. Or anything like that. But no, I mean, seriously, a lot of people will sometimes look at that and say, well, I'm just a regular working guy. You know what I mean? Like, you're different, kind of thing.
No pedestals, man.
Well, it's all about the modesty, for sure. But the thing I want to emphasize really is, I was not that guy that was just handed things, by any stretch.
Right.
I struggled in school. I was the type of person that had to read things 5 or 6 times before it actually made sense to me. Write out my notes again, just to, get that repetition, get that reinforcement, et cetera. There's almost nothing, I would say, in all honesty, that with effort, with the hard work and me as an example, I mean, that you can't really, that can't be achieved. I mean, I'm living proof of that, man. Like, I would be nowhere but for, hard work and perseverance and that ability to just, keep driving on and look for inspiration wherever you can. I mean, that's the other thing I think I would add, for listeners out there, et cetera. Find those people that are a positive influence in your life and hold on to them.
Absolutely.
No matter what. Yep. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for negative, out there, and you can find people all day long that want to bash your ideas and things like that. But when you find people that are inspiring to you, and drive you to be a better person than you are, stay with those people, for sure, because that will make you a better you, no matter what. At any level, no matter what you're doing, however you're deciding, even if it's about building your family, it's just all about that as well. Find those people that drive you to be better, and no matter where they are, teachers, whoever it happens to be, and you'll end up in a better place, for sure.
Hell yeah, man. Those are good nuggets. Yeah, I think this is a pretty good time pretty natural point to stop.
Sure.
That's what I look for. A nice, good conversation, authentically, on location.
On location in Philadelphia.
In Philly. Nice. Anything you want to plug? I know we talked a little bit about Operation Homefront and Warrior Rising.
Sure. All good organizations. Operation Homefront, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, obviously a field office, deserving of support. I'm on the advisory board there. They're still, doing a lot of great stuff. First and foremost to my heart, is Warrior Rising, though. Yep. I'll tell you for sure. The work that Jason's done, like I said, is helping a lot of people to create a lot of really good things. www.warriorrising.org. You can go to the website. You can go under the Get Involved tab and become, put in an application, become a veterapreneur. You can, if you're out there and you've been an entrepreneur for several years and can offer advice to up-and-coming, military businesses, you can become a mentor. And certainly, by all means, if you are so inclined to support, the organization financially, please do, because no one I know can operate, without money, nowadays. So absolutely awesome. Third group, Vets to Industry that I'll add, that I'm also on the board of the foundation there, doing a lot of great work. Brian Arrington, trying to piece together resources for veterans, stem that tide of, the 22 number that we all hate to hear. So a lot of good work, being done by a lot of good groups. Recommend them all. As I said, first and foremost to my heart, Warrior Rising, but certainly all the others, as well. Anybody, helping the, military, certainly a deserving cause, in my book, and encourage others out there as well to, do it. So
sounds great, man. Well, I appreciate the chat.
Thank you.
Ken Vennera, everyone. Peace.
You've been listening to Half the City with
do it.
Brian Schoenborn, presented by 8B Media. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends, and leave a solid 5-star review to ensure these stories get spread far and wide. For more information, as well as to listen to other shows, including Relentless, a survivor's search for passion, purpose, and inner peace, and Beyond Relentless, be sure to check out 8bmedia.com. Thank you for listening.